Hey guys, tonight we journey far from your cozy bed into the slow, sun-scorched mystery of the Sahara Desert. Imagine it, endless rippling dunes, wind hissing softly over your ears, and an air so dry it crackles in your nostrils. You're not just walking across sand, you're gliding over buried secrets, lost roads, and cities swallowed whole by time. You probably won't survive this, if we're being honest. You didn't even pack a water skin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I always like to imagine a whole world of sleepers tuning in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly across the warm belly of a desert that was once green. Really, thousands of years ago, the Sahara was more of a savanna, home to hippos, crocodiles, and humans who made a living hunting, gathering, and probably arguing about who forgot to dig the well again. Every step you take now presses into sand that might be hiding pot shards, lost sandals, or the collapsed roof of a city abandoned long ago. The wind blows over something hard. You kneel, brushing back the sand with your hand. You uncover what looks like the top of a wall-shaped stone long buried. It's not much, but it whispers. Someone lived here. Someone loved here. Someone probably complained here about how everything tastes like sand. Archaeologists call these ghost cities or paleo lakeshore settlements, depending on how well they slept. Some are so thoroughly swallowed by dunes that even satellites squint to spot them. Others peek above the surface like half-remembered dreams. Places like Obar, Zakhara, or even the real-life Garamontes settlements, finished cities that challenge our ideas of what the Sahara once was. Historians still argue whether entire kingdoms rose and fell here or if they're just fancier campgrounds. You walk farther. The sun is a coin pressed into the sky, and your shadow follows you like a loyal, overheated pet. Bones crunch underfoot, not human. Don't worry, just the remains of animals that never made it out. These same trade routes once carried thousands of people, camels, and wagons groaning under the weight of salt, ivory, cloth, books, and sometimes one very angry cat. The air shifts. You're walking now along the faint outline of an ancient road, straight as a sunbeam. It leads nowhere now, but once it connected civilizations. The Berbers, the Tuareg, the Garamantes traveled these paths. The Romans even tried to stretch their empire into the desert's edge, sending envoys and elephants, and promptly regretting their sunscreen choices. A breeze brushes your face. It smells faintly of crushed stone and dried date palms. Maybe you're imagining it, maybe not. In the distance, hills rise like the spines of sleeping giants, geological folds that once framed fertile basins. Back when lakes shimmered here, you picture boats on those waters, fishermen cursing tangled nets, and maybe someone inventing early sunblock out of crocodile dung and misplaced optimism. You pause to rest near a half-buried wall, sun-bleached and worn. Your fingertips trail over its surface. Petroglyphs, not just scratches. Ancient carvings, some of them showing giraffes, elephants, even dancers. Real people with stories and songs long erased. Rock art in places like Tassili Najjar and Tadrar Akakis paints a different Sahara, one bursting with life, culture, and maybe drama over whose goat wandered off again. There's a story here, buried in silence, one about how climate shifted, the rains faded, the green turned brown. Cities that had thrived on lake shores were left high and dry, literally. People packed up their lives or didn't, and the desert took back what it once gave. Sand crept in, roofs collapsed, temples faded, and what's left is this, the soft hush of nothing and the occasional twitter of a very lost bird. A quirky tidbit for you. Some explorers in the 19th century believed these ruins were evidence of Atlantis. That's right. Actual scholars once stared at some half-sunk sandstone walls and said, "Oh yes, this is clearly where the Atlanteans built their sunroom." Historians today are less enthusiastic about that interpretation, but the mystery remains. These cities don't show up in Greek epics. They weren't always on maps, but they were real. Once, the ground warms your feet as you continue. You pass the remains of what might have been a well, stones piled in a circle, the kind of thing someone might miss unless they're looking with tired eyes. You imagine someone hauling water up here, wiping sweat from their brow with a woven scarf, and yelling at their cousin to stop throwing pebbles into the jug. Night is falling slowly now, casting lavender shadows across the dunes. The Sahara turns cold, quick as a whispered secret. But the stories buried here are patient. They've waited through heat waves, dust storms, and GPS mishaps. They'll wait a little longer. You reach a low ridge, and below it are shapes in the sand, just barely visible in the moonlight. The ghost of a street, maybe walls, a city your breath catches. You could walk down there and never know its name. Or you could name it yourself. Sleepy Town. Population. One very tired listener. You settle into the dune. Let the sand hold your weight. The stars above you are the same ones traders once used to cross this desert. The same stars some of those lost people probably whispered wishes to before fading into history. There's something beautiful about that, isn't there? The idea that long after names are forgotten and buildings crumble, stories still shimmer quiet, patient, buried in sand, waiting for someone like you to come walking by. You sleep for a moment under the stars, made just a blink, maybe a whole century, and when you stir again, it's morning. The sun is low, the sky the color of old papyrus, and your back aches in that good, satisfying way that says you survived something ancient. You rise, brush off a generous helping of sand from your clothes and somehow your ears, and follow the faint trail of hoof prints leading east. Soon, you come upon the ruins of another settlement tone that hums with a little more history. The walls are higher here, the layout clearer. You can almost make out the grid of narrow streets, a central courtyard, and several square rooms surrounding what might have been a granary. Welcome to the forgotten heart of a once bustling Saharan town. If you listen closely, you might hear echoes of market shouts and goats suing something they definitely weren't supposed to. The Garamontes, you're told by your sleep-soaked memory, ruled this place around 500 BCE. They weren't desert nomads, but full-on urbanites. Think of them as desert hipsters building underground irrigation tunnels called fogars, cultivating palm groves, and sipping on something slightly fermented from handmade clay cups. Historians still argue whether the Garamontes were a small elite atop a slave-powered kingdom, or just really clever engineers who were ahead of their time. You pass a rust-colored column, cracked but still standing, and spot a piece of pottery half buried near its base. The sun glints off the rim. Painted geometric lines, maybe a bowl for grain, maybe for salt cakes. You pick it up, and it's cool beneath your fingers, like the memory of a shadow. You think of the potter shaping it centuries ago, maybe humming a tune, maybe grumbling that no one appreciates his swirls. And then you spot it, a stone staircase leading underground, partially filled with sand, yes, but unmistakably man-made. You crouch and follow it down slowly. Air changes, hair becomes cooler, heavier. This could be part of a fogger system, one of those underground aqueducts that brought water from deep within the earth to thirsty cities above. These tunnels stretched for miles, dug by hand with stone tools and sheer stubbornness. You can imagine the workers down here, scraping away at the rock, eyes straining in torchlight, listening to the trickle of water like it's music. You don't stay long, it's dark. And frankly, you've seen enough movies to know this is how cursed artifacts get involved, but still, the place has left its impression on you. Literally. Sand in your shoes. Back above ground, you cross a narrow causeway and find yourself facing the edge of a cliff. Below, in the valley, are the barely visible bones of another town. This one seems more on a perhaps a trade center. You squint. Large platforms, a walled enclosure, and beyond it, a zigzag path that might have once hosted caravans. The people who lived here weren't isolated. They were connected in a vast desert network, and the cargo of choice in this network, salt. Yep, good old salt, white gold of the desert, Forget spice caravans, for Memphis folks were hauling big, heavy slabs of salt across hundreds of miles of burning wasteland. Tuareg traders would load their camels with massive salt cakes mined from the heart of the desert in places like Totani, then trudge south toward markets in cities like Timbuktu or Gao. You picture one of those caravans, no hundreds of camels, each laden with salt slabs wrapped in hide, led by a group of traders in indigo-dyed robes, their eyes shaded beneath dark veils. They move slowly, but surely, leaving a trail of hoof prints and flattened footprints behind them. Salt wasn't just a seasoning, it was currency, medicine, and in some cases, a sacred substance. You could trade a slab of it for gold, or goats, or one of those fiddly musical instruments no one ever really learns to play. A quirky tidbit for your dreams tonight. There are entire salt cakes still buried under the dunes, abandoned by caravans that ran into trouble eaters, sandstorms, or bad directions given by overconfident guides. Some say there's a salt slab out there with a perfect camel-shaped dent in it, preserved for centuries. Don't fact-check that in the morning. Walking now, your path follows the old trade routes that once connected these desert cities. They weren't random trails. They were deeply strategic. Traders traveled at night to avoid the heat, using stars as their GPS and ancient wells as pit stops. You see one of those wells now, a deep, stone-lined shaft with a simple wooden pulley, bleached by time. You imagine the relief of reaching this spot, the quiet joy of clean water after a week of drinking from skins that tasted like leather, and regret. As you move on, you notice patterns scratched into rocks at intervals, symbols, perhaps rude markers. Some look like animals, others like constellations. Were they messages, warnings? Historians still debate whether these symbols were meant for navigation, ritual, or just graffiti from a bored teen trader in 1234 CE. Over a low ridge, the ruins of a caravanserai come into view, an ancient inn for weary travelers and their camels. You enter its crumbling walls and see empty stalls, rooms once lined with rugs, and maybe a central fire pit where stories were swapped and tea was poured with more ceremony than necessary. You hear voices, just faint, merchants haggling, children laughing, a flute playing somewhere off to the side. Maybe it's just your imagination, maybe not. Memory has a funny way of echoing louder in quiet places. You sit down near what must have been the main courtyard. Your fingers trace the grooves in the stone, worn smooth by centuries of passage. The wind lifts a fine spray of sand, soft against your cheek, and you close your eyes for a moment. Beneath you are centuries of footsteps, journeys made under stars, songs sung to pass the hours, deals struck, salt traded, letters carried. A whole world moved through her, and now it's just you, listening. The sky darkens again. Twilight rolls in like a tide, slow and violet. You feel the temperature dip, and stars begin to prick the heavens, one by one, just as they did for every traveler who ever passed this way. And as the chill wraps around you like a thin blanket, you think, maybe you're not so alone out here. Maybe every footstep leaves a little echo behind. The stars blink overhead like they've just remembered something important. You stretch out beneath them, belly full of wind and the ghost of tea, and try to imagine what comes next. From your perch at the edge of the caravanserai, you gaze across the vast, empty plain and see nothing. Just dunes and night, and the quiet whisper of time shuffling its feet. But if you squint just right, you can almost make out the shimmer of firelight in the distance, a faint flicker, a welcome. You rise, dust yourself off again because desert dust never stops dusting, and begin to walk. The sand underfoot is cold now, crisp almost, like powdered moonlight. You follow the ancient trade path, still visible in places where it cuts into shallow valleys or hugs the edge of hardened earth. And before long you arrive. Another city, this one larger, deeper in memory. You recognize parts of it oddly. Thick outer walls, high windowless buildings, market stalls arranged in neat lines, a few low domes. Welcome to the lost city of Tikrit, center of an early Iron Age civilization that thrived long before Molly or Gana were even ideas on a dusty scroll. Historians still debate whether the builders of Tikrit were related to the ancestors of today's Sonic people or if they represented a now-lost lineage altogether. What we know is this: they farmed, they herded cattle, they built their city in tiers using dry stone masonry, and they left behind grain silos and pottery so finely made you'd swear someone modern sneaked it in just to mess with the timeline. You walk into one of the granaries, its thick stone walls still holding a bit of warmth from the day. Inside you see piles of cracked pottery shards, husks of ancient millet, and a curious little carving of a cow. Not realistic, more of a doodle. You picture a child, hidden from chores, scratching it into the stone with a stick. Some things never change. Outside, a breeze kicks up. It carries with it the scent of dry grass and maybe a distant cooking fire. You follow it and soon arrive at what must have been Tikrit's market square. Low walls and rows of stalls, each one with a stone bench, a bit of raised flooring, and a carved groove where maybe coin or cowrie shells change hands. Salt cakes again. Always salt cakes. Here's a fun detail to lull you back into semi-slumber. Some salt cakes were branded with trade emblems, tiny stamps pressed into their surface before the cakes dried under the sun. It's like ancient product packaging, except you couldn't eat the label, or maybe you could, but only once. The Tikrit traders were known to deal in more than just salt. They traded beads, iron tools, leather goods, smoked fish, and millet by the sackful. Their markets were orderly, organized, and deeply communal. And because the city was arranged in clusterches and blocks around communalaries, there was a real sense of neighborhood. Gossip flowed. Arguments started over goat ownership and who left the communal bowl out in the sun too long. But eventually, the rains began to fail. Desertification crept in slowly like a cat. Crops yielded less. Wells dried. Families left in waves, heading south toward greener land, and knowingly sowing the seeds of later kingdoms. You walk through their abandoned rooms now, stepping carefully over stones once part of someone's hearth. And as always, the quiet here is not empty, it's rich with memory. You settle by the remains of a wall decorated with faded ochre lines. Maybe it was once a shrine. Maybe just someone's living room with taste. A goat trots by. You blink. The goat blinks back, as if to say, yes, I'm also a ghost. Mind if I join you? The firelight flicker returns to the edge of your vision. You follow it, winding through dunes that roll like sleeping giants, until a new city emerges. This one's different, larger still. A kind of sandy metropolis. You've arrived at the outskirts of Gengeno, one of sub-Saharan Africa's oldest known urban centers. It predates Islam's arrival in the region, predates even the rise of Ghana's empire, and its smells faint loudly off clay. The city's mostly earthen mounds now, but once it bustled with tens of thousands of people, traders, potters, smiths, farmers. The river ran fuller back then, curling through the landscape like a silver ribbon, bringing water, fish, and mosquitoes in equal measure. Gengeno didn't have grand palaces or towering temples. It wasn't a place of kings, it was a place of people. And you can feel that in its layout. Narrow lanes, tightly packed homes, communal granaries, clay walls that once shone in the sun, daubed in layers of ochre, indigo, and saffron pigments. You kneel beside a sunken fire pit and scoop up a bit of broken ceramic. It's decorated with a ripple-patterned symbol of water. Some say, others say it's just decoration. Historians still argue whether these symbols were spiritual or practical, but either way, they're lovely, and you like that someone took the time. A woman appears in your periphery, carrying a wicker basket on her head. She isn't surprised to see you, just walks past, vanishing around a corner. Maybe 700 years ago. The city still breathes here, just quietly. The night deepens. You feel it settle into your bones like velvet. The stars above seem to lean a little closer. The ancient cities of the Sahara were never just mirages, they were living, breathing communities. And they didn't vanish all at once. Some faded slowly. Others were buried by sandstorms. A few still live in new forms, under new names. You rise, stretch, and follow a path away south. Somewhere out there waits a market still alive with trade, with stories, with music and salt and heat. You haven't reached it yet, but you will. And as your feet crunch softly over centuries of sand, you realize sleep isn't always stillness. Sometimes it's travel. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, at the edge of a river. It glides past slowly, not in a hurry, its surface glassy, under the pale dawn. Mist curls from it like breath from a sleeping giant, and reeds boot gently at its banks. The silence here is deep and almost sacred, broken only by the occasional croak of a frog or the flutter of a bird's wings. You step forward and realize your path has brought you to the banks of the Niger River, the watery spine of West Africa's old trade routes. This river was never just water, it was a road, a lifeline, a boundary, and a connector. People settled near it, empires rose along its curve, goods floated down it, drifting between worlds. And beside this great bend lies one of the true marvels of the medieval world, the city of Timbuktu. Yes, Timbuktu, that legendary place that your teachers may have used as shorthand for really far away. Turns out, it's very real. And in its golden age, it was far from boring. You enter it now not through dusty gates, but through memory, into a city of mud brick buildings that glow rose gold in the morning light. The scent of spice hangs in the air, nutmeg, clove, and something unfamiliar, and everywhere you turn, you see books. Not digital, not printed, handwritten books, bound in leather, tucked in carved niches, read aloud by scholars in teal robes beneath the shade of mud-plastered arcades. Timbuktu wasn't just a trading post. It was an intellectual galaxy. Historians still argue whether it rivaled European capitals of its time in literacy rates, but it certainly beat most in sheer enthusiasm for learning. You stop at the entrance to the Sankar Mosque, part mosque, part university, part miracle. It looks like a sand castle left by gods with good architectural taste. The minaret rises like a pyramid, stairs leading up the outside, and students sit beneath woven awnings transcribing verses, debating law, reciting poetry in unison like monks of the soul. The scholar Al-Sadi once described Timbuktu's scholars as so numerous their pens never dried. That's quite the bragging, judging by the ink stains on the students' robes. Not an exaggeration. But there's more to Timbuktu than parchment and poetry. Down the alleyways, shaded markets buzz with life. The soft clink of copper pans, the low bellow of a tired camel, and, yes, the unmistakable smell of salt cakes stacked beside bundles of dried fish. The salt here comes in long rectangular slabs, almost like paving stones. Traders lug it down from the mines of Tagaza far to the north, hundreds of miles across deadly desert. Sometimes they ride on camels. Sometimes they walk. Always they pray the wind is kind and the wells haven't dried. Salt was currency, literal money. People paid taxes in salt, paid wages in salt, gave gifts of salt. In a region where food spoiled fast and sweat never stops, salt was worth its weight in, well, itself. One fringe theory suggests the phrase "worth your salt" originated here, not in Rome as commonly claimed. It's not widely accepted, but you've got to admit, it feels fitting. You meander through the marketplace, your fingers trailing along hanging fabric dyed in deep indigo and saffron. Merchants call out greetings in Songhai Tamashek, Arabic. Children laugh, goats complain, and someone plays a three-stringed lute nearby, its melody winding through the chaos like a whispered story. And just beyond the market, the caravanserai, always a caravanserai. This one hums with energy. Camels kneel patiently, heavy with bundles of salt, books, and sometimes gold. Traders in russet robes share dates and gossip. One man sleeps face down on a rolled carpet, snoring gently, his hat slowly sliding off. You sit beside a group passing around a wooden bowl filled with goat stew and soft millet cakes. They offer you some with a nod. The food is warm, spiced with cumin, and a hint of mystery. It tastes like history. Someone tells a story of a caravan that vanished entirely in a sandstorm near Arwane. Another swears they saw a desert spirit guiding them out of a dried riverbed. You listen, chewing quietly, the spice numbing your lips. The desert doesn't just trade goods, it trades tales. As the sun rises higher, Timbuktu shimmers. The streets burr slightly in the heat, but the energy remains electric. From here, you could follow the river east toward Gao, another trade city once bursting with Songhai power and lakeside wealth. Or you could head west toward the Atlantic coast, where salt meets sea and gold flows like water. But for now, you stay. The midday lull settles over the city like a light blanket. The call to prayer echoes from the mosques, soft but resonant. A breeze stirs the hem of your robinette that you remember putting one on. There's a small bookshop tucked behind a stall of honey and beeswax candles. You duck inside. The scent of aged parchment greets you like an old friend. The shelves are uneven, made of date palm wood, and stuffed with folios, scrolls, and slim volumes bound in red leather. You flip through one. It's a medicinal treatise, written in Arabic with annotations in Old Songhai. The handwriting is careful, the ink dark brown with time. One book, cracked open on a lectern, shows a drawing of the Sahara. Not a map as you'd know it, but a kind of dreaming map. Mountains are scribbled in like giant teeth. Rivers bend in impossible arcs. Cities rise and fall like waves. A tiny camel sits at the edge of a scribbled salt pan. Above it, someone has written, "The road is dangerous, but the destination is sweet." You smile. It's a bedtime story all its own. Outside, the light softens again. You leave the shop, brushing past a child selling mint leaves. You take one, press it between your fingers, and inhale. It's sharp, green, alive. And somewhere far off, drums begin to beat. Not war drums, festival drums. The kind that say, "We've survived another day. Let's make it count." The rhythm follows you back to the riverside. You sit once more by the water, feet bare in the mud, watching the reflections stretch and waver. And as the golden light thickens into amber, you feel something shift. Timbuktu is not a myth. It's not a joke for bored school children or a metaphor for distance. It's real. It was luminous. And parts of it still whisper through the world like a caravan that never fully disappears. You're deeper and now deeper into the folds of the Sahara, where cities are less familiar, and the landscape begins to blur into something dreamlike. Your feet move across crusted sand, and the horizon trembles with heat. But just as your body begins to question this strange journey, something breaks the monotonous stone. Not a scattered ruin or lone pillar, but walls, deliberate and enduring. Welcome to Jado. It rises like a mirage that never fades, an abandoned fortress city in the Tenor Desert, northern Niger. Its towers lean gently with time, their mud brick edges softened by wind, their windows empty. Yet there's something proud in the way Jado stands, like it's still waiting for its people to return. You wander its streets in the quiet afternoon. No market buzz here, no chance of salt or gold, just the rustle of wind through narrow alleys. The houses are tiered, stacked almost like a hillside Italian village, but made entirely of desert clay. Flat roofs, once shaded with woven reeds, are now sun-bleached and cracked. Jado is often called a ghost city, not because of spooky legends how those exist, but because no one's entirely sure why it was abandoned. Some say it was climate shift, as water sources dried up. Others believe disease swept through, or that raiders pushed the inhabitants out. Historians still argue whether Jado was a permanent settlement or more of a seasonal stronghold. But the city's scale speaks of long occupation. You see carved wooden beams still jutting from crumbling facadas, hints of artistry in the plasterwork, tiny stars, crescents, symbols of protection. Someone once cared deeply here. You step into a wide, open, spacious courtyard, or perhaps a prayer square. The wind quiets. You imagine a crowd gathered here under the moon, palms raised, chanting softly into the night. Or perhaps children ran through these corridors, chasing one another with palm frond toys, their laughter bouncing off the walls. And then there's the well. In the center of the courtyard stands a stone-lined shaft, circular and deep. You peer in blackness. A puff of cooler air brushes your cheeks. Water once lived down there, maybe still does. People drank from it, washed, cooked, survived. It's sobering to think how fragile civilization can be when it hinges on something as simple as water. A few meters away, an ancient door lies flat in the sand. Its frame is scorched slightly, charred on the edges. Fire, lightning, a careless cooking accident centuries ago, no one knows. But it makes you pause. You sit on a fallen wall, brushing grit from your robe, and imagine the city alive. Traders passing through with small caravans, women weaving baskets in shade, smoke rising from clay ovens, maybe even a traveling poet reciting songs of nearby oases, and the danger of sleeping near certain sand dunes because that's where the spirits dwell. Ah yes, the spirits. Locals still talk of Giotto with a certain reverence, maybe just a hint of avoidance. Some say it's haunted by jinn, desert spirits who despise the living. Others whisper of gold buried in the walls, cursed by priests who vanished without a trace. One particularly persistent legend tells of a snake as long as 5 camels stretched nose to tail, which slithered through the city and made its home in the central mosque. You probably won't survive that snake. Just saying. You rise and wander toward a structure slightly taller than the rest of mosque, judging by its orientation and the remnants of a mihrab still visible. Inside, the air is cooler. Dust lies thick. A few small feathers rest near the corner, hinting at birds who found brief shelter here. And carved into the inner wall, barely legible, is something rare, a name. You trace it with your fingers. The script is Arabic, probably Kufic, blocky and elegant. The name might be Al-Hassan, or Ibn Yusuf, or Fatimatu. It's faded, debated, almost erased by time. But someone claimed this space once. Someone wanted to be remembered. You lean against the wall and let your eyes close. There's something deeply soothing about ruins, isn't there? Not sad soothing. They remind you that nothing is permanent, not even fear or worry. That everything leaves its mark, even if the sand eventually covers it. When you step back outside, the sun is lower, shadows lengthening like slow fingers across the stones. A few scraggly bushes dot the surrounding dunes. Tiny beetles trace their winding paths beside your footprints. Life here is small but stubborn. And then you notice something unexpected. A piece of broken pottery. It's curved, glazed faintly blue with a faded pattern of triangles around the rim. Not grand, not gold, but beautiful in its own way. You pick it up. It's warm from the sun, smooth along the broken edge. Who last held this? Were they cooking, drinking, pouring water for a guest? You place it gently on a low ledge exactly where the light hits it best. A tiny museum moment, just for you. As you leave Giotto, you glance back once. The city seems to watch you go, quiet and undemanding. It asked for nothing. It simply endures. You walk back into the desert, the sand cooler now underfoot. Overhead, the sky deepens into bronze, then lavender. You're alone, but not lonely. Far in the distance, a faint howling begins, not Wolvesno. They don't live here but the wind, playing tricks. Or maybe just singing a long-forgotten lullaby. Tonight, Giotto sleeps once more. You keep walking. The desert breathes around you softly, rhythmically, as the dunes rise and fall like the swells of a sleeping creature. Your steps carry you farther back in time, back to when empires rose not with armies, but with caravans. And wealth came not from conquest, but from salt. Yes, salt, that grainy stuff you now casually sprinkle on popcorn. In the heart of the Sahara, it was white gold. You find yourself in the open plaza of a market town that hasn't existed for centuries, yet somehow still feels familiar. The air smells of sun-warmed clay and dry grass. Goats bleat in the distance, and traders shout in Arabic, Tamashek Hausa, and a dozen dialects you don't even recognize. The market is in full swing. You're in Tagaza. It's not much to look at from a distance, just squat, square buildings made entirely of salt blocks, glinting slightly in the morning light. But inside, it's buzzing. Donkeys laden with satchels shuffle past towering stacks of crystallized slabs. Men in turbans indigo saffron. Rusifagel over the price of a single tile, running fingers along its grain like master artisans. Here, salt isn't mined from the ground, it is the ground. You picture workers digging rectangular blocks from dry lake beds, stacking them carefully, then hauling them on camelback for hundreds of miles southward. 3 slabs of salt, you hear someone mutter, equals 1 sack of grain. 8 slabs buys a bolt of cloth. A full camel's load might even score you a tiny gold trinket if you know the right person. Historians still argue whether Tagaza was permanently inhabited or more of a pit stop for seasonal traders. It was harsh, even by Saharan standards, brutally hot in the day, freezing by night, and lacking fresh water. Some accounts say the entire town was manned by enslaved laborers who slept between the salt slabs, their skin cracked and white from constant contact. You shift uncomfortably. Salt, it preserves, it flavors, it pays, but it also burns, corrodes, and dries. You pass a woman roasting something over a small iron pan of meat. Maybe it smells sharp and peppery. She sprinkles a pinch of salt over it with the same gravity you might use for a final prayer. You smile. Food is food, even in the driest corner of the earth. A little boy walks by holding a cake of salt like a toy. It's shaped like a sun, with tiny rays etched into the edge, not edible, of course, but beautiful, decorative. A gift, a game, you're not sure. There's a section of the market where musicians play. Yes, even here. One man strums a one-stringed instrument while another shakes something like a rattle made from hollow gourd and pebbles. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic. Traders sway slightly as they pass. In the background, you spot one of the most surreal sights yet. A salt house slowly melting. Not from rain. Rain is rare, but from time and wind. Its edges are rounded, corners sloughing into chalky piles. A child carves shapes into it with a stick, a camel, a palm tree, a sun with a smiley face. Kids are kids, even in places made of salt. You duck inside a warehouse stacked floor to ceiling with slabs. The interior is cool, eerily quiet. A few men sleep in the corners, heads wrapped, arms folded. You imagine the silence thickening during the midday heat, when even flies doze, and the sun turns the streets outside into shimmering mirages. But Tagaza isn't just about trade. There's politics here too. Control of this salt was once vital to the prosperity of West African Empire. Scana, Mali, Songhai. Each taxed the trade heavily, protecting the routes with soldiers and alliances. You picture armed escorts guarding camel trains as they departed from the salt flats, moving southward through sandstorms and scorching wind. A quirky tidbit for you. The famed traveler Ibn Battuta visited Tagaza in the 14th century. He didn't like it at all, called it the most dismal, desolate place on earth. Harsh review, but to be fair, he was probably craving couscous and some nice date wine. And yet, despite the hardships, people came here, people built here, because value doesn't always look like gold. Sometimes it's a rough rectangle of sodium chloride, chipped and dusty, clutched in a gloved hand. As you step back outside, you see the caravans gathering at the edge of town. Hundreds of camels, their long necks swaying gently, form a slow-moving procession. Each carries 4 or 5 salt slabs strapped to their sides, wrapped in goat hide padding. The caravan leader raises a curved staff and calls out. A chant begins, slow, rhythmic. It's not for you. It's for the road, the desert, the survival of the journey. You can't help but close your eyes and let the vibration of the sound wash over you. When you open them again, you're not in Tagaza anymore. The ground has changed to smoother now, less white, more gold. A few palm trees lean gently over a trickling stream. And in the distance, you spot the next town, its buildings sun-baked but intact, a promise of humanity nestled once more into the desert's arms. You take a breath, taste the salt on your lips, and walk forward, toward the markets, toward history, toward the next layer of this sand-swept dream. The sun tilts downward now, mellowing from its high desert blaze into a softer golden hush. Your sandals crunch over compacted earth as you near another town, this one still faintly buzzing with the last flickers of daytime trade. Dust swirls at your feet in lazy loops, and you step through an arched gateway of sun-bleached mud brick into the heart of Wallata. You pause. This place feels different, more settled, more scholarly, a crossroads not just for goods but for ideas. Wallata sits at the southern edge of the Sahara, a terminus for caravans that started way up north in salt-stained Tagaza and now arrive here, sun-wearied but full of promise. The markets remain, yes, but they're quieter now, more measured, more dignified. You're just in time for the shift from bustling trade to whispered knowledge. You make your way through narrow alleys where walls lean in close, not out of menace but familiarity. Some are painted with faded patterns in Digo spirals, red diamonds, and others bear scratches in Arabic script, a casual poem or perhaps a merchant's reminder list. You pass small doors behind which families prepare evening meals. You catch the scent of lentils, millet, a little cumin, and gap salt. Wallata was once a serious intellectual hub. Think of it as the Ivy League of medieval West Africa, especially before Timbuktu really took off. Historians still argue whether its golden age peaked in the 11th or the 14th century, but everyone agrees this was a town where books were bought with gold, and students traveled for weeks just to sit beneath the right teacher. You arrive at a low building crowned with domes of red mud brick, cracked and noble, like the back of a sun-baked tortoise. A boy of maybe 10, barefoot and beaming, points you inside. You duck into the room. Scrolls everywhere, piled neatly on shelves carved from wood darkened with age, leather bindings, ink-stained parchment, a lingering scent of beeswax and old stories. Some are open geometry, poetry, astronomy. Others are rolled tightly and tied with fraying string. You can't help but brush your fingers along one, reading a title, On the Shadows of the Moon. You have no idea what it means, but it sounds important. A scholar sits cross-legged in the corner, his robes a worn saffron, his beard long and white. He doesn't look up, he's writing, on a page of dried sheepskin, using a reed pen dipped in dark ink. Every stroke is steady, intentional, sacred. You realize this isn't a library. It's a Zavia private learning house, and you are welcome, but not expected to speak. You settle into a corner and just listen. The scholar speaks softly, reading to two students from memory, a passage about patience and the moon's slow path across the sky. His voice is low, warm, rhythmic. You find yourself nodding off, just slightly, until a rooster crows somewhere in the distance and jolts you back. A quirky tidbit for your notebook. This very town was once so revered that some camel caravans carried books as cargo, not for sale, but for copying. Scribes would set up in shaded corners and reproduce manuscripts by hand, sometimes embellishing them with gold leaf or lapis lazuli dust. Knowledge wasn't just power, it was an investment, sometimes literally. Outside, a small crowd gathers in the central plaza. You follow the murmurs and find a performance underway. A storyteller. He stands tall on a cloth-covered crate, wrapped in a russet shawl that whips gently in the breeze. No stage, no props, just words. His tale is about a man who tries to smuggle gold hidden in loaves of bread, only to be outwitted by a monkey. Everyone laughs, hard, including you. It's nice at this mix of gravity and mischief, learning and laughter. You sit near a woman grinding millet by hand. The rhythm of her stone against stone sounds like the heartbeat of the town. She hums quietly, and her child naps beside her with a wooden tool shaped like a crocodile. You're fairly sure it's a crocodile. Could also be a boat. Evening prayers begin. The call to prayer rises from a nearby minaret, thin and reedy but beautiful, like the voice of the desert itself. Men and women pause their conversations. Cloth bundles are set down, spices covered, doors drawn shut. You watch as the town exhales together, facing the same direction under a sky now streaked with copper and violet. You climb a low rooftop and sit. From here, you can see the town in full, the geometric layout of alleys and courtyards, the camel paddocks beyond, the shimmer of a distant caravan arriving late, hooves silent in the sand. It's funny, you think, How a place this remote became a beacon. How people traveled across oceans of dunes for math lessons and theology debates. Wallata didn't just trade salt and gold, it traded perspective. It showed that the edge of the world could be its heart. Historians sometimes wonder how much of what we know about Wallata is exaggerated, stitched together from travelers' tales and imagination. But then you sit here in this hush, and you think, it doesn't really matter. Some places are real not because of their stones, but because of the stories they leave behind. And you're one of those stories now. The rooftops glow gently under the first stars. A pot clinks, a dog barks once lazily, a door creaks and shuts. You lie back on the warm, flat clay, eyes half closed, feeling the pulse of the town under your shoulder blades. This place sleeps lightly, but it sleeps, and so do you. The stars are still above you when you rise, but a pale light has started to seep along the eastern rim of the desert. You shake off the warmth of sleep and return to your feet, bones humming gently from the clay rooftop. The city of Wallata stirs below in soft murmurs and yawns, the way a cat stretches before it's fully awake. You gather your things, your satchel of dream parchments and memory spice, and begin again. Your path points westward now, toward the famed city of Timbuktu, a name that sounds more like a punchline than a place, but you're about to learn just how real it was. It takes days. You pass ghost villages made of crumbling red stone, their wells dry, their doorways leaning like weary travelers themselves. You see lizards sunbathing on rocks and vultures wheeling high overhead, always hopeful. Your feet carry you past riverbeds etched deep into the land, now dry as bones. And then, one hazy afternoon, you see it Timbuktu shimmering at the edge of the horizon like a mirage that forgot to disappear. You expect something grand and golden. What you get is low, sand-colored walls, dusty courtyards, the muted elegance of a place too smart to shout. But don't let the modesty fool you. This is where the maps ended once. Timbuktu, the mythical city of gold, camel-throned and song-wrapped. The name still drips with romance, even though historians will remind you that most of the tales about its impossible riches were wildly exaggerated by European explorers who couldn't resist a good campfire story. Still, you walk into the city with your heart slightly pounding. The streets are narrow here, shaded by woven awnings that creak in the breeze. You hear 5 languages in the span of a minute: Arabic, Songhai, Tamashek, Fulani, even a trace of medieval Portuguese. The place hums like a scholar's dream. Timbuktu rose to power not through war or conquest, but by knowing exactly where it was, perfectly placed at the intersection of river trade, desert routes, and cultural curiosity. Caravans brought salt, scholars brought books, rulers brought gold, and somehow it all balanced here like a desert symphony. You find yourself in front of a thick, square building made of mud brick and timber, shaded by stubby wooden beams protruding from the walls like ribs. This is the Jingerber Mosque, built in the 14th century under the patronage of Mansa Musa's, that Mansa Musa, the guy who once crashed the entire gold market of Cairo by being too generous during his pilgrimage. The mosque is enormous and humble at once. Its walls curve slightly, softened by time and sandstorms. Inside, voices echo as students debate under flickering lamplight. You step into the shadows and feel the cool rush of old knowledge. Here you're told thousands of manuscripts, once livid handwritten books on everything from astronomy to botany, theology to music theory. They were kept in private homes, shared carefully, passed from generation to generation like living relics. It's said that some Timbuktu scholars could recite entire texts from memory, including the footnotes. You still forget your own phone number. One mainstream historical fact that sticks with you: at its peak, Timbuktu had more books than most European cities of the same era. Universities, check. Libraries, check. Study circles that went past midnight, you bet. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some manuscripts were kept wrapped in cloth and hidden in clay jars, not just to preserve them from moisture, but to protect them from magical theft. Apparently, It wasn't just moths people worried about. Some believed spirits liked to steal knowledge too. You wandered deeper into the city, guided by the scent of ink and bread. A baker hands you a flat cake sprinkled with coarse salt. It crumbles softly in your mouth, the salt weighting your tongue just enough to keep walking. You pass stalls selling indigo cloth, dates, copper trinkets shaped like gazelles. A child laughs as he chases a donkey wearing bells. And you notice something lovely. Everyone here seems to be talking about something important. Not politics, not gossip, ideas. You hear two older men arguing kindly about lunar eclipses. A woman selling water debates crop rotations with a traveler from Ga. A boy sits cross-legged near a doorway trying to write his name with a crooked reed pen, tongue between his teeth in deep concentration. It feels like every square inch of this city is alive with thought. You rest in the courtyard of a wealthy merchant's home. He welcomes you with mint tea and slow conversation. He shows you his collection of ancient coins, each stamped with a different ruler's face. This one, he says, tapping a weathered disc, was from a king who believed the stars could read us. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's fame came more from its wealth or its wisdom, probably both. But sitting here, warmed by the sun and surrounded by thoughtful silence, you lean toward the latter. You sleep that night under stars you've never seen before. The sky seems deeper here, more dimensional, like you could fall into it if you stared too long. The city rests lightly beneath it, secure in its knowing. In the early morning, as merchants begin to arrange their wares and camels grunt softly in the streets, you prepare to leave, but not before slipping a gift into the folds of your satchel. A tiny hand-copied poem someone gave you about the wind whispering secrets into the ears of dunes. You smile. This city didn't just trade goods, it traded questions, and those are the kind that tend to follow you home. You leave Timbuktu with a head full of riddles and sandal soles that now know the texture of centuries. The city behind you fades into a low ochre haze, its secrets carefully folded into mud brick libraries and spoken dreams. The trail curves north now, hugging the lines of the Niger River for a time before veering again into the open Sahara. The desert here is strangely less dramatic, more thoughtful. You pass through open plains of cracked salt and patches of scrub where goats blink slowly under thorn trees, like they're pondering your presence. Ahead lies a city that once shimmered as brightly as gold itself. Its name is Tagaza, and while it never held temples of knowledge or elegant marketplaces, it had something even more precious in the desert: salt. You probably didn't expect salt to be the superstar of this story, but here's the truth. Back then, salt was worth its weight in gold. Quite literally. Without it, empires fell apart, people died, and your average camel caravan would have zero reason to exist. As you approach Tagaza, your nose is the first to react. There's a sharp bite in the air, something between a dry tear and the tang of an old wand. Then you see it, an entire town constructed almost entirely of salt blocks. Walls of salt, roofs of salt, even benches made from thick, squared slabs that glint under the sun like polished bone. The whole place seems like it was dreamed up by a dehydrated architect with a sense of humor. And yet it worked. Tagaza wasn't pretty, but it was powerful. Salt mining was brutally simple. Dig into the crust, pull out chunks, shape them into slabs, stack them, and wait for a caravan to arrive. The work was hard, the sun unkind, and the water undrinkable unless you boiled it twice and prayed. But the people endured. They built this salt-laced skeleton of a town, and it thrived for centuries. A mainstream fact you're chewing on like one of those salt cakes. In the 14th century, the trans-Saharan trade depended so heavily on Tagaza's salt that controlling it was a major geopolitical flex. Empires squabbled over it, and rival rulers sent spies dressed as wandering poets to snoop on output. Your feet crunch along the ground, past white mounds where blocks are stacked like oversized sugar cubes. Workers, mostly enslaved people brought from the south, swing picks against the crust, their backs glinting with sweat. The sound echoes like bones knocking in a tune. You stop to watch two men load salt cakes onto the backs of camels. Each beast is fitted with a wooden saddle, slung with thick cords and dried leather pads. One camel grunts and spits dramatically, like it's aware of its importance and deeply unimpressed by it. A quirky tidbit for you. Some traders believed that eating small flakes of the purest Tagaza salt could give you visions of gods, buried water, or future routes through the desert. So yes, salt was currency, but occasionally doubled as dessert psychedelia. You sit near a salt bench and run your hand along its edge. It feels rough and damp with morning dew. A child nearby offers you a salted date, which you accept. It's oddly good, sweet and savory, like a dessert and a warning. Later, in the cool of an underground chamber, you listen to an old man recite a poem carved into the wall with a bone stylus. It's about a salt block who dreams of being gold until he realizes that without it, the gold wouldn't get fed, watered, or carried anywhere. Historians still argue whether Tagaza was a permanent settlement in the truest sense or more of a transitory work camp that grew into a town out of necessity. Either way, it left a lasting trace across the desert's memory. As the sun drops low, shadows stretch weird and long across the crystalline streets. The wind shifts and carries the sharp scent of salt inland toward places that depend on it but never see where it came from. You lie on your back beneath the stars that night, feeling a little like one of those salt blocks yourself, worn, dry, but still holding shape. You think about all the invisible economies that run the world. You think about what it means to be essential and unsung. And you think, not for the first time, that history's finest details are the ones nobody tells you in school. The next morning, you rise early. The salt town is already alive with Moshiankamos burping, men shouting in 6 dialects, traders counting slabs with chucky fingers. You nod to the child from the night before and give him a smooth pebble you've carried since Jen. He grins, presses it to his forehead, and runs. You're heading further north now, into terrain that offers less and demands more. The wind kicks up small storms, dry spirals that whisper along the ground like lost travelers. The air is cooler, but it comes with a weight that hints at distance and solitude. No trees, no villages, just lines in the sand and the promise of another city hiding somewhere ahead. You take one last look at Tagaza, shimmering pale and sharp under the rising sun, like the skeleton of a forgotten palace. You walk on, crunching salt beneath your boots. You trudge on beyond Tagaza's glittering skeleton, the salt dust clinging to your boots and the horizon stretching flat and merciless. The desert here changes subtly, no more sharp white crusts, just endless swells of ochre sand and the occasional stubborn thorn bush, like nature's way of reminding you it's still in charge. The heat is relentless, but something about this section of the Sahara feels less hostile. Maybe it's the slight coolness in the morning air or the way the sun hits the dunes just right, turning them into waves of liquid gold. It's the kind of place where silence has weight and the smallest sound, a distant cough, the flap of a tattered cloth, feels amplified. Ahead you glimpse the faint outline of an ancient city half swallowed by the desert's hunger. This is Wadain, a once thriving trade hub perched on the edge of the shifting sands. It doesn't shout its importance like Timbuktu or gleam like Tagaza. Instead, it whispers, worn smooth by centuries of wind and dust. You make your way closer, noticing the crumbling stone walls patched with dried mud, the remnants of arched doorways, and narrow streets that have seen more footsteps than you could count. The city feels haunted, but not in a spooky way, more like the comfortable ghost of a place that once hummed with life. A mainstream fact to mull over. Wadain was a critical waypoint for caravans crossing the Sahara from the 13th century onwards, famous for salt, gold, and slaves moving north and south along the trade routes. It was also a melting pot of cultures, Berber, Arab, and sub-Saharan African, each leaving marks on the town's architecture and traditions. Inside the city walls, you find a dusty marketplace, long since abandoned but still hinting at its past bustle. Broken pots, rusted iron tools, and faded fabric scraps tell stories of merchants bartering over spices and salt cakes, of children chasing goats, of elders sharing tales under saffron-colored awnings. There's a peculiar detail here. The city's name, Wadain, is said to derive from a local phrase meaning meeting place, which fits perfectly because this city was a hub for exchanging not only goods but ideas, and noose a kind of ancient Sahara social network. You pause near a well, its rim cracked but still sturdy, imagining the weary travelers who once dipped their hands into its cool water. Grateful for the brief relief, you cup some of that water, savoring the coolness as it slides down your throat. Historians still argue about how deep Wadain's connections went. Some suggest it was a gateway to the fabled Western Sudan empires. Others think it was more of a modest stopover, significant but not central. You stroll through the narrow streets until you reach a small mosque, its minaret leaning slightly as if bowing under the weight of time. The place is quiet except for the soft whisper of wind slipping through cracked windows. Outside, a group of children plays a game with pebbles and sticks, their laughter carrying on the breeze. You watch for a moment, feeling a rare warmth amid the desolation. As the day wears on, you climb a nearby hill for a bird's-eye view. The city looks like a mirage caught between sand and sky, a faint heartbeat in the vastness. You can't help but smile, thinking about how such fragile places manage to hold onto their stories, even as the desert tries to erase them. When night falls, the stars bloom overhead, dim and bright and countless. The Milky Way spills across the sky like spilled salt, and you lay back on a cool stone, feeling tiny but connected. You think about Wadain's people, their resilience, their hopes, their losses, and you realize that lost cities aren't just about ruins, they're about memory, endurance, and the quiet refusal to disappear. You drift to sleep with the soft desert breeze humming a lullaby, the ancient sands keeping their secrets close. The sun rises slowly, painting the Sahara in muted shades of rose and amber as you leave Wadain behind, your footsteps barely stirring the sand. Ahead lies Chinguetti, another city swallowed partially by time but still fiercely standing against the desert's endless advance. Unlike Wadain's quiet solitude, Chinguetti pulses with the memory of scholars, pilgrims, and traders who once made it a center of Islamic learning and culture. You enter through a crumbling stone gateway, where intricate Arabic calligraphy still clings to the walls, telling prayers and verses that have been recited for centuries. The streets are narrow and winding, lined with buildings that seem to lean into each other for support. The colors here are softer earthy browns, deep ochres, and the occasional splash of indigo from faded doorways. One of the most remarkable facts is that Chinguetti's ancient libraries hold some of the oldest manuscripts in the Sahara, texts on theology, astronomy, and law penned on delicate parchment, preserved against all odds in this unforgiving climate. These libraries make the city a beacon of knowledge, a fortress of thought amid the shifting sands. You spot a man carefully opening a weathered book beneath the shade of a date palm, his fingers trembling slightly as he turns the brittle pages. Nearby, a small group of children listens intently to an elder recounting tales of caravans and desert spirits. The air hums with quiet reverence. Quirky tidbit: Chinguetti was often called the city of libraries and at one point had more books per capita than many European cities during the medieval period. Imagine dusty scrolls surviving camel rides and sandstorms, like literary superheroes in leather bindings. Historians still argue whether Chinguetti's rise was due more to religious devotion or strategic location on the caravan routes. But either way, it became a spiritual oasis in the vast, dry expanse. You wander through the market square where salt cakes are traded alongside dates, millet, and intricately woven baskets dyed in saffron and indigo. A merchant offers you a small piece of salt cake, its crystallized surface glinting like tiny jewels, salty and sweet, a compact history of Sahara trade. As midday heat ripples, you seek refuge inside a centuries-old mosque, its arches casting patterned shadows on the earthen floor. The air is cool and scented faintly with incense, a stark contrast to the dry wind outside. You watch as the faithful perform their prayers, their movements fluid and precise, a dance as old as the desert itself. There's something calming in this ritual, a reminder that even in isolation, human connection through faith and tradition endures. Outside, children chase each other past stone fountains, their laughter bouncing off the weathered walls. You remember the story of a legendary griot from Chinguetti, whose songs preserved the oral histories of entire clans, a living archive carried on the wind. The evening descends softly, and you climb the city's ancient ramparts for one last look. The dunes roll out in every direction, the city a lone jewel on a vast golden cloth. Stars begin to prick the sky once more, and the desert night wraps you in a velvet embrace, cool and infinite. You lie back on the stones, the weight of history settling gently around you, and you realize that places like Chinguetti are not just ruins, but living dreams, kept alive by the stories told beneath this vast Saharan sky. The morning air feels crisp as you make your way toward Tikrit, a lost city even more remote, where mud brick towers rise like sentinels over a landscape dotted with ancient stone circles. The Sahara here is quieter, more mysterious, as if it holds its breath, guarding secrets buried beneath layers of ochre earth. Tikrit was once a thriving center for early Saharan civilization, dating back thousands of years before the great camel caravans. You walk among the ruins, noting the carefully planned layout of streets and dwellings, a stark contrast to the wild, unpredictable dunes surrounding it. The mud brick walls bear faint traces of red and yellow pigments, faded murals that hint at the lives and beliefs of people long gone. One of the most fascinating facts is that Tikrit's inhabitants were among the earliest to practice agriculture in the Sahara, cultivating millet and sorghum despite the harsh environment. This challenges the common idea that the desert was always barren and uninhabitable, showing instead a dynamic landscape shaped by human resilience. Nearby, you find a circle of standing stones arranged in patterns that some scholars suggest might have been used for celestial observations or ritual gatherings. It's a place of mystery, where archaeology meets legend. Quirky tidbit: local folklore claims these stone circles are the footprints of Jinn, desert spirits said to dance under the moonlight, making the night air thick with whispered enchantments. Historians still argue whether Tikrit's decline was due to climate change, overuse of the land, or shifts in trade routes. But the city's remains speak of a society that was sophisticated and deeply connected to its environment. You wander through a dry riverbed once vital for sustaining life here, imagining how water must have shaped daily existence and trade. The silence is broken only by the soft crunch of your footsteps on cracked earth. Near the ruins, a small oasis sparkles with date palms and reeds, a green jewel amid the ochre. Nomadic herders arrive with their flocks, exchanging stories and goods, a living thread linking past and present. As the sun climbs higher, you feel the heat pressing down, a reminder of the desert's unforgiving nature and the fragile beauty of life here. At sunset, the sky blooms with fiery colors, and you find a quiet spot to rest. The stars will soon return to guard these ancient stones, keeping watch over a city lost in time, but never truly forgotten. The golden light of dawn slips across the vast salt flats of Todani, where the earth simmers like a mirage, and the air tastes faintly of minerals. Here, you find yourself amidst another vital chapter of Saharan history, the salt mines and the arduous caravans that carried this precious mineral across unforgiving desert landscapes. Salt was the Sahara's white gold, a commodity so valuable it shaped trade, wealth, and even empires. You watch as weathered miners chip away at massive blocks of salt with rudimentary iron tools, their faces dusted in white like ghosts of the desert. The work is grueling under the scorching sun. Yet these salt cakes would journey hundreds of miles exchanged for gold, ivory, and slaves in the great markets of West Africa. The landscape is surreal, endless white plains interrupted only by clusters of salt mounds and the slow-moving shadows of camels laden with heavy slabs. The caravans appear like ancient serpents threading their way through the sand, a lifeline connecting disparate cultures and economies. Quirky fact: some caravans carried enough salt to feed entire cities for a year, yet one of the most prized uses was preserving food, especially meat and fish, making it essential in places far from the sea. Historians still argue whether the Saharan salt trade began as early as 2000 BCE or emerged later during the height of trans-Saharan commerce. But there's no doubt about its profound impact. You notice how the miners and traders have adapted to the brutal conditions: thick robes, wide-brimmed hats, and the ritualistic drinking of tea to stave off dehydration and fatigue. This small ceremony, a moment of calm, echoes centuries of desert wisdom passed down through generations. At the edge of the flats, a bustling market springs to life. Salt cakes are weighed and bartered alongside kola nuts, cloth, and spices. The mingling of tongues and smells creates a sensory tapestry, a reminder of the Sahara's role as a crossroads rather than a void. The evening breeze cools your skin, carrying the distant call of traders preparing their camels for the night journey. You can almost hear the whispered promises of wealth and survival intertwined with the timeless rhythm of the desert. As stars blanket the sky, the salt flats glow faintly under their light, a quiet, crystalline world where past and present converge, and the story of human endurance continues to unfold. Under the vast indigo sky of the Saharan night, the caravan rests around flickering campfires, the smoke curling upward like wisps of ancient tales. Here, in the stillness, the market's chaos fades into a gentle hum of whispered stories and the clinking of salt cakes stacked carefully beside the weary camels. You watch as traders and nomads share simple meals, breaking bread and pouring sweet mint tea, their voices low and rhythmic like a lullaby for the desert. The air is cool now, carrying the scent of burnt wood and distant spices, a sharp contrast to the harsh sun and parched days. In this fragile moment, you realize how these salt markets were more than places of commerce. They were hubs of culture, knowledge, and connection. Music, poetry, and storytelling thrived here, weaving a social fabric as enduring as the salt itself. An intriguing tidbit: some scholars believe the tradition of Saharan poetry and oral history developed alongside these markets, serving as living archives in a land where written records were scarce. Historians still debate how much the salt trade influenced the spread of Islam and language across the desert, but the evidence points to a rich interplay of faith and commerce shaping societies. You imagine a storyteller recounting epic journeys of lost cities swallowed by sands, of warriors and traders braving storms, and of the ever-elusive promise of prosperity shimmering just beyond the horizon. Nearby, a young girl sketches patterns in the sand, her fingers tracing ancient symbols that speak of the desert's mysteries and the resilience of its people. Her quiet creativity mirrors the salt's transformative power, turning the ordinary into something precious. As the firelight flickers, you feel the pulse of history beating softly beneath the vast night sky, a reminder that even in the most barren places, life finds a way to flourish through stories, trade, and shared moments. The desert silence invites you to breathe deeply, surrender to the timeless rhythms, and drift toward dreams filled with salt-sweet winds and the endless dance of stars. You wake to the first pale light spilling across endless dunes, a soft gold melting into the cold blues of dawn. The desert stirs gently, a world awakening from its long, quiet slumber beneath the night's velvet cloak. Around you, the last shadows of the salt market dissolve as merchants prepare to pack their goods, their voices mingling with the low murmur of camels shifting beneath woven blankets. The final stretch of this journey feels like a slow breath, calm, measured, and tender. You notice the faint crunch of salt crystals underfoot, reminders of the countless footsteps that have passed here before you, each carrying stories of trade, survival, and hope. Historians still argue whether these lost cities once thrived as grand trading hubs or if they were simple waypoints for weary travelers. Either way, their legacy is etched deep into the shifting sands. The ruins, half swallowed by desert winds, whisper secrets of civilizations that rose and fell like the tides of the ever-moving dunes. A quirky detail. Some explorers swear they've seen ghostly caravans tracing the ancient salt routes under the moonlight, shimmering like mirage, perhaps memories refusing to fade. Whether fact or fancy, the desert holds its mysteries close, wrapped in silence and sand. As you rise, the faint scent of wildflowers and distant grapevines drifts in, carried on the warm breeze, reminding you of life beyond the desert's harsh embrace. It's a promise of renewal, much like the salt cake's traded hair, simple, enduring, and sustaining. You feel a soft peace settling over you, the kind that comes from knowing that even in the quietest, most barren places, history pulses with life, and stories continue to flow like rivers beneath the sand. So as you close your eyes now, let the desert's calm wash over you, carrying you gently toward dreams filled with endless skies, ancient whispers, and the quiet beauty of forgotten places. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.